Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Rooted with Resilience. We are officially on episode 3. I'm so excited. I just want to first off thank you for all of my supporters that have subscribed, and just a little reminder to hit that like, subscribe, share if you can. That just helps to show your support, and it also helps to boost my videos and get my message out there. So thank you in advance. I am your host, Sabrina, and today our episode is titled You Have Purpose. So pretty much I want to speak a little bit about the sermon that my church did on this past Sunday. It was very powerful. It was very timely, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Pretty much, they just started a series called Wrecked But Rescued, and the title itself is kind of self-explanatory, but they just kind of dig deep on no matter how wrecked you are, no matter how messy your life is, you still can be rescued. So I just loved that message, and it really resonated with me and where I'm at in life. Nobody is beyond repair or redemption. So if this is speaking to you, if you're in a moment in your life or a place in your life where, you feel like your life is a wreck, your life is a mess, this is just kind of a phase and a transition that you're going through. This past year has been very messy in my life, just complete wreck, complete nightmare. But I've been doing a lot of self-reflection. I have been, attending service and just getting these jewels from God, that this is all for a purpose. This whole sit down, this whole, isolation phase that I'm going through, he had to separate me to be able to help me. And I didn't see it at first, but I'm really, really starting to see it now. And I'm just very thankful that I'm stepping into that season where, I'm listening to God's voice and I'm listening to what He has planned out for me. I do want to first off say too that this podcast is, like, I officially realized that this podcast is my mission, because I have wanted to start this podcast for a while and I kept making excuses. I kept having setbacks, and things in my life were keeping me from starting this podcast. And when I finally started this podcast, episode 1, like I spoke about last week on episode 2, after I aired episode 1, a lot of things happened and it kind of threw me off with my mental health and just life in general, where we speak about like that messiness and that, chaos that's going on in your life that you have no control over. That happened after episode 1. Then when I just aired episode 2, more things came my way, and all that is the devil trying to attack me. He's trying to attack me because he's really trying to keep me from doing this. He's really trying to keep me from using my voice and allowing God to use me as a vessel and as a voice for the people to spread His good news and spread His message. And, what do we say? Satan, not today, because I'm no longer listening to him. I'm still going to have my days, of course, but that's what motivated me even more to do this episode 3. Yay me, I'm proud of myself, because I'm not going to allow him to win anymore. I'm not gonna keep, listening to his lies. And I'm just gonna stay consistent and, stay with you guys. And I know that that's gonna help others as well, and help others to, hear my message. And I really truly believe in my heart that this is what's gonna help people to get out of that rut and to hopefully seek, Jesus's help and help him to, or allow him to rescue you. But yeah, so back to the wrecked but rescued from the sermon on Sunday. Our pastor spoke about Mary Magdalene, and pretty much she's the second Mary in the Bible. So the first Mary is obviously Jesus's, earthly mother, and this is the second Mary. And I just found it interesting because I knew her name and I knew of her, but I didn't really know like the depths. But she's mentioned 4 times, or in 4 different books in the Bible. So she could be found in Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And, I just find that very powerful because she's a woman, first of all. No shade on the men, but just, me being a woman, we don't really get a lot of credit. We don't really get a lot of recognition. And that really, resonated with me. I'm like, wow, so she was a very important person, and he highlights her a lot in the Bible. And he pretty much speaks a little bit about her background and her story. So she had 7 demonic figures that were haunting her, that were inside of her. And Jesus came and rescued her. He healed her from those 7 demons. And that's deep. That's super, super deep because, we're all fighting demons every day. Like, we all have our own inner demons, from things that happened to us, from dirt that we did. And, the fact that he rescued and healed her from those demons just shows and proves that he can rescue us too. Like, we're not beyond repair. We're not beyond redemption, and, her life was a wreck. You can imagine, the 7 demons that she was, battling with. Her life was a wreck, it was a mess. And she still followed Jesus. Like, she was a very faithful follower to Jesus, and her faith never wavered. Like, when she went through things, and she went through a lot, and her faith never wavered. Like, she continued staying on his side. She continued being faithful to him and loyal to him. And, another thing that resonated with me too when they were reading the scriptures was that when she was weeping, weeping is not just, shedding some tears. Like, weeping is like in a moment of despair. Like, you are just, your whole life and heart is shattered. You are weeping. You are, just devastation, and there was moments where she was weeping and Jesus appeared to her. So, not only did he heal her, but he also comforted her, when she was going through the most detrimental times in her life. And I just, that really touched me, because, we all go through things that devastate us and shatter us and wreck us, and we don't know who to turn to. Sometimes we get lonely and we turn to, former habits. We turn to, people, and sometimes that could be the wrong people, and that doesn't do anything for us, So I know that this sermon came to me on purpose because God always be guiding, and he was pretty much just telling me, hey, like, you're gonna be okay. Just continue following me and continue having faith in me. And I'm always going to be here to heal you and comfort you. So that's why I'm sharing that with you, because how I felt inside was, very just seen and heard and comforted. So this is my mission and this is my purpose of this podcast, is to share those feelings with you guys, to tell you guys also that you guys have purpose, and, God is here to heal you and to comfort you and to rescue you. It doesn't matter what you've done in your life. It doesn't matter, where you're at in life and what you're still currently doing. He's here. He's there with you, and he's always waiting for us to follow him, and he's going to be there to hold our hand and rescue us every time, and I think that's just a beautiful thing. So, when life doesn't make sense, we got to stay close to Jesus, and life may not make sense to a lot of us, and when life doesn't make sense, what that means is like, what am I doing? What's next? Why are all these things happening? What is my purpose in life? What do I do with myself? I feel like I don't have no talent. I feel like I have, nothing to give. You start to feel worthless and helpless, and all of that those are lies from the devil. We all have a purpose. God made us individually with a purpose, and it's up to us to continue following him, so that way we could hear him and listen to him. And when we hear him, by listening to him is by, doing what he says to do, because that's where our purpose comes in, and fulfilling our purpose, So basically, what that says is come to him messy. That's what he wants. He uses the most wrecked. He uses the messy ones. Those are the ones that are chosen. And it reminds me of, let me see if I can find it. It reminds me of something that I had found on Facebook, because he pretty much used the most wrecked. He used a prostitute, he used a murderer, he used an adulterer, he used a thief. The list goes on. And no matter what, he still used those people, because we're not beyond repair. Who are other people to say we can't be used because of what we've done in life, the choices that we made in life, and that just resonates with me, because, I've done a lot of dirt in my life. My life is a mess. It was a mess. It's still messy. I'm cleaning it up, and it's baby steps, but we can't do that without God. So this is pretty much what I have found on Facebook. It says, if God told a prophet to marry a prostitute, if God crowned an adulterer as king, if God used a murderer to deliver millions from bondage, then who are you to decide who's disqualified, who's too broken, who's too messy, or who's unworthy of God's purpose? God doesn't recruit from perfection. He redeems from surrender. Heaven isn't intimidated by someone's past. It's attracted to a heart that says yes. Stop gatekeeping grace. Stop playing holy jury. Stop confusing God's process with your preference. Because if God only used clean people, none of us would be chosen. Whew! Tell me that ain't a message. And what stood out to me was stop gatekeeping grace. So pretty much is like what I'm doing here. There's no gatekeeping over here, and did it freeze? Okay. I'm back. I think it froze for a minute. Yeah, so there's no gatekeeping over here. Pretty much I get the messages, every day I take heed, every day I listen, and I'm here to share it with you guys, because we have to share our rescue story. We have to share God's message, because that's going to help others, and God encourages us to share our rescue story. How did God save you? How did you survive? What did you survive? What did you overcome? And those are things that, we're encouraged to share, because that's going to help the next person. That's not only going to help the next person to motivate them to share their story to help others, because we all individually have our own story. We have our own messages, and the more that we do that, the more that we're going to help save humanity and help to spread God's love, But yeah, share that story, share how God saved you and what he saved you from, and that's going to encourage others to share their story, like I said. And also, it's going to help people to, feel seen and feel heard. Like, what they're saying is so true. Like, I'm dealing with that too. So when you share your story, you're helping others to relate to you, and you're helping them to feel like they're not alone. And that's pretty much my motive here and my mission. That's why I feel like, Satan is trying to stop me at every angle, because he doesn't want me to spread God's word. He doesn't want me to fulfill my purpose. He wants to keep me stuck, and I'm done being stuck. Not Satan, not today. Like, I tell him every day, like, you're not gonna win. I'm done being stuck. I have a voice, I have a story, I've been through some shit, and I'm here to spread that to others, that I'm still here. I survived all of that. I dealt with things when I was a child that no child should have ever had to deal with, and here I am, always trying to break the cycle for my children, always being resilient, always overcoming, still waking up, still standing up, and if I'm on the ground, it's because I'm kneeling to God to pray to him, and that's it, and that's all God wants you to do, is to show up, continue fighting, continue overcoming and telling the devil not today, because he can't win in our lives at all, and, none of us have it figured out. We didn't come with a map, we don't have a roadmap to do life. We are literally doing life blind, and while juggling, our jobs and finances and children, like parenthood, throw all of that on top. It's like we deserve to give ourselves more credit. Sometimes most times we just, really beat ourselves up. Like, we're not doing enough. And that's a lie. If you're just getting up and showing up to life and overcoming the day, you're already doing enough. You're already winning. And you're already, showing the devil that he can't win. And he's not going to win. And I want all my people to know that you guys are loved. You guys are worthy. You guys have purpose. And all you need to do is just continue showing up and talk to him. Sit in silence. There's so many like distractions and chaos in life. that it really just kind of, it drowns out God's voice, but when you really sit in silence, sometimes we don't understand, that moment of isolation. And sometimes we confuse it for that we're being punished. Something like, is there something that I did? Like, why is this happening to me? Why, like, that's literally, this past year has sat me down, and I didn't understand at first. I was angry, I was sad, I was depressed. I was like, why is this happening to me while others are just like flourishing and things are going good in their lives? Like, why? What did I do? I'm a good person, I help people. It just didn't make sense. But everybody goes through it, and everybody is going to go through it. We all have chapters in our life where God sits us down and he isolates us. But it's when we're ready, when he knows we're ready. Even when you don't feel like you're ready. Even when you feel like you're not qualified. Okay, God qualifies the unqualified. Okay? He calls us and he chooses us because he knows that we are capable of the assignment. And once I started understanding that, I started understanding why I'm going through everything that I'm going through. So instead of saying, why me, I say, why not me? You understand? Why not me? Why not you? God sees everything that you're going through. Okay? And he's there with you, comforting you, healing you. But you have to sit down somewhere, okay, to be able to hear him and hear his voice, hear what he has to say to you, hear his purpose for you, and you have to sit down in isolation to be able to understand your true purpose, what you're here for, what he designed you for. And you start to realize that this is not by accident. This is designed. And when you start to really understand that, it brings you peace and comfort, and your faith grows because you start to say, wow, God, like, I understand it now. I've been running like a hamster wheel, getting no results, falling to the same habits, falling to the same people, that didn't have my best interest at heart, people that take advantage, these habits that destroy my life. It feels fun in the moment, but when it's all said and done, I feel empty. I don't feel fulfilled. But when I'm in a moment of isolation, like at home and I'm by myself, and I'm able to reflect and read God's word and spend time with him and hear him, I'm able to feel, and in order to heal, you gotta feel. And it gets emotional, You cry, you sob, you yell, you get angry. But at the end of the day, it's healing, and it's he's filling your cup, instead of us going out there and draining ourselves. We want to spend time with people that bring us closer to God. If we are spending time with people that are drifting us further from God, those are not your people. And it doesn't mean that they're not good people. They're just not there yet, you know? And it doesn't mean like we just disregard them and, no. This is why I have this podcast, because I want my people to listen and I want them to hear this message that, that they're capable and they're worthy. And I want them to hear what I say, and resonate with it, because I know that they could relate. I know that y'all could relate. And this is my mission. This is what I'm here for. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. I'm a mess too. My life is a wreck. But guess what? I'm on God's side. I'm on God's side because I want to be rescued. God has rescued me many times before, and He continues to rescue me. He continues to save me, and He could do that for you too. So care about yourself, care about your life, give yourself more credit, because, if God is telling you, I forgive you, and He died for, He sent His only begotten Son to die for our sins. That alone shows us that we're worthy, and that we're capable to do great things with our lives, and don't waste it. That's where I was at in life. I just had to be like, what? I'm done wasting my life away. I'm done wasting away, because that's all that was. Like, not having love for yourself is a very, very, very unsettling feeling. Like, it's not a good feeling at all. Not loving yourself. Like, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I am loved. I am worthy. I am important. I am special. I am beautiful. I am handsome. I'm a good father. I'm a good mother. I'm a good friend. I'm a good person. I have a good heart. The reason why I'm like this is because life beat me up. The reason why I have a guard up is because life beat me up. The reason why I don't trust people is because life beat me up. The reason why I got this ego and I'm like, screw you, and not showing you love is because life beat me up. We gotta heal from those things. When you start healing from those things, you start moving with positivity. You start moving with, with love and with purpose, and you start building relationships with people, and you start to move without that ego, without that facade, without that pride, because God tells us in the Bible, like He literally tells us and warns us that we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to move with pride. We're supposed to love thy neighbor. It's easier said than done, especially when people wrong us. Ooh, what? I used to be Miss Petty Queen, and it's not worth it, because what are you gaining out of it at the end? It's better to just, chuck it up and be like they're lost, because people are going to wrong you. People are going to do hurtful things to you and make you feel like you're not included, make you feel like you're not worthy, and it's not a you problem, it's a them problem. They're still moving without grace, and we got to pray for them. When people, are out here not showing God's love, we got to pray for those people. Because when people go through things and people are going through real life shit, excuse my language, but when people are going through real life shit, okay, worse than what you're going through, why are you not reaching out? Why are you not being the bigger person? Why are you waiting for that person to hit you up? They can't. They're going through some shit. You understand what I'm saying? And then I still go out of my way and reach out to people. You know? And we just got to stop all that. You know, we really got to stop all that. And we really got to understand how hurt people can be with actions, with your actions. You know? When people, you know, like, you got to start, like, envisioning what their life might be like, you know, what they're feeling, you know, and be there for them, be that comfort for them. Check in on your people. I say that every episode. Check on your people. And people are just not doing it. People are not checking on you. People are not inviting you. People are not popping up. People are not coming over. Like, you know, it's just a very disconnected world, you know? And we got to understand that that's hurtful. You know, when someone's life gets ripped apart and their closest people get taken away from them, you got to understand that that's hurtful. That's devastating. You know, sometimes I can't even remember to make certain appointments, let alone I'm not going to think about reaching out to every single person. But that's a time when people tell people, you know, that's the time where you're supposed to be the one to reach out. You're the one who's supposed to be that rock. You're the one who's supposed to, you know, show that support and that love, so that way they don't feel alone. Because when you don't, and they see, you know, other people still interacting with one another, they feel left out, you know, and they feel very alone, you know. And throughout this whole situation that I've been dealing with, I've been feeling very alone. Like, the support has not been supporting, you know. I think those that have supported, but there's just a lack of support, and it's sad because a lot of people could do more, you know. And people got to really step outside of, you know, their own bubble, you know, and do for others, you know, especially people that are going through things like the orphans, children that lost a parent, you know, the teenagers that are in jail, you know, the mother that lost her son and her son's father that was the love of her life, you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't have that help anymore. Like, those are the people that, you know, you gotta be like, dang. You know, like, if I see it, you know, if I'm reaching out as much as I can, because, you know, my mental capacity and my mental health is still at risk, or not at risk, but like, I'm still going through it. I'm still taking the time to reach out to people that lost their children, their child, their best friend, you know, still taking time to, you know, check in and do the best that I can, you know, because I know that I was absent last year. I know that I missed a lot, but I can't be faulted for that, you know. And people have to start really thinking more about others than thinking about themselves and their own feelings, you know. And that's definitely something that I had to learn as well, you know, even though I've always been more about others than myself, and I had to start like putting a pause to that because it was draining my own cup. But you know, I was going through a lot, and there were things that I missed and things that I feel bad for because life just goes by so fast, you know? And if anyone felt neglected of my absence, I apologize, honestly. But when people go through things, I don't wish this on anyone, but when you go through it, you'll understand. Your whole life just shifts. You don't even think about your phone. You don't think about others. Sometimes you don't even want to be around people. And that's horrible because I'm very family oriented, but there was just times where I didn't even want to be around people. And I isolated a lot. But I needed that. I needed that time to really wrap my head around things and to heal because, life can get heavy. Life can get very heavy. And without support, it can be even heavier. With moms, especially single moms, that have children, just, people gotta remember what that child is going through, what that mom is going through. Mom is overstimulated. Child is, going through it too, and we just gotta be there. We gotta make an effort. Like, it's 2026. We're still in January. We're still in the first month of the year. It's a new year. Like, let's really start doing more for others that really need it, okay? Because that person might be drowning. They might be feeling so hurt, when they see certain things and they don't feel included. Their little boy is not included. Like, people could pick up the phone and say, hey, what are you guys doing today? And pick you up, because I have no car right now. I got into a major car accident last year. March will make a year. That was another way that God sat me down. So it was just back-to-back losses. I lost my son's father, lost my pets, lost my son, lost my car. And it's just been a lot, and, for those that, make an effort as much as they can to include me, I love y'all and I appreciate y'all. But it's just kind of like, it's been a long, lonely year, and we just have to make a mental note of, like, I can be there. I can be more supportive. A phone call is enough. A phone call, hey, checking in, how are you? How are you feeling? Really? Now I'm not going to accept I'm fine. Nope. How you feeling? How you doing? Well, just know that I'm here and I love you. What's JoJo doing this Saturday? I'm going to pick him up and I want to spend time with him and have him spend time with his family. Like little things like that, because like this little boy has been through so much. He really, really has. And he doesn't deserve that, And I just pray every day, that people just start stepping up more for not only him, but for us, because my son is only 17 and he's incarcerated. And, on his 18th birthday, where I could be celebrating his 18th birthday, he's going to be getting transferred to the adult side, because right now he's in the juvenile side. And like literally at midnight on his 18th birthday, he's going to get transferred to the adult side. So now he's going to be around like grown men, you know, and he's just a teenager, you know, and it just, it scares me, it worries me, it hurts me, because that's my son. And, you know, I just wish things could be different. Sorry. I wish things could be different, but they're not. So that's another reason why I really rely on God and lean on him a lot, because, you know, I'm telling myself every day that, you know, he's using my son as well, and he needed to sit my son down as well and use this time for isolation. And he saved my son no matter what, so I'm always thankful. But these feelings are real. No matter what, they're still real. You know, I'm still a mother that's hurting and grieving and worried for her baby boy. You know, he's not a grown man. He's not like he's 30 and he kept repeating crime after crime after crime and he still ain't learning a lesson. No, he was a teenager that was an adolescent that went through things because he lacked a father figure, and he did things that we did, you know? And he now is incarcerated, and it just hurts me that he doesn't have more support, you know? And that's pretty much my message as well, like, along with the support, you know, we need to be more supportive for those that are really going through it. Okay? We're not talking about little shit. You know, little shit matters, of course, because we're all going through something. And I pray for everybody that is feeling hurt and battling with their mental health, you know, but we're talking about like real life things. Death, incarceration, grief, you know, financial crisis, you know, raising children on their own and not having that second person to lean on and to, you know, get a relief, you know, it's just a lot, you know, and I don't want to be on here and giving you guys like a sob story, but this is important. You know, this is important to put my message and my story out there, so I have no regrets. This is important to be vulnerable and transparent about the things that you're going through, because I'm not going to come on here and put up a facade, and I'm not going to come on here and tell you that life is great. You know, I'm not going to do that, because it would be a lie. Okay? Life is manageable. Okay? And life is getting better. And the only reason why it's manageable and it's getting better, okay, is because I have God and I'm leaning on God. God is my only source of support, that he's giving me all this love, and he's talking to me, and he's guiding me and shielding me and comforting me and telling me it's gonna be okay. You know, my faith wavered, but it's not wavering no more. That's what gives you true peace in your mess. You know, he's the one who rescues you from your mess. You know, we're wrecked, but we're rescued. You know? And that's a beautiful thing. So I just really hope that you guys, you know, found comfort in my words and with, you know, that past sermon that I just shared with you guys from Sunday, because it really moved me. It was beautiful, you know. And just continue leaning on him. If you don't know him, get to know him. If you don't read his word. Start reading his word. If you fell back from prayer, if you fell back from reading his word, if you fell back from going to church, we all go through it. Trust me, I know. But I'm here to tell you that you're always gonna be lost. You're always gonna be empty without him. Because these flings and these habits, they're familiar, and we run to them because that's how we've always coped. That's how we've coped with things in the past, so we run to what's familiar, and at the end of the day, though, it makes you feel empty, and you're not fully, no matter what, we're not going to be 100% healed and 100% full. That's when we reach the perfect world, when we reach paradise. But God can give us some relief, and it's not temporary relief like the habits and the things that we run to and we've always run to in the past. We're worthy of his love, so don't think that your life is too far gone and you're too far gone. God is inviting you and welcoming you with open arms, But I'm gonna go into an article. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, right here. So this happened back on December 8th, but it's been circulating around social media because I am originally from Massachusetts, and I have still friends on social media from Massachusetts, and this has been circulating recently on my social media For You pages, and people shared and things like that. So even though it happened back in December 8th, this is something that just came to me now, and I still want to share it because no matter how much time goes by, people's stories deserve to be shared. This is the story or an incident of a 32-year-old black male named Jacoby Kenny. People called him Kobe. And he was incarcerated at the Suffolk, it's either Suffolk or Suffolk. I never knew how to pronounce that word. But the Suffolk or Suffolk County House of Correction. So he was incarcerated, and that jail is often referred to as South Bay. So he was incarcerated there, and he was killed by some correctional officers there. He was beat to death. And I guess there's been a rash of deaths within the state prison system between September and November that I was completely unaware of. I haven't clicked on that link yet, so I'm going to click on the link and read it, but another time. But these are things that, we need to know about, because this is what's happening in the world and in the jails, and it worries me because, I have a son that's incarcerated now, and a cousin that is incarcerated as well. So it says, according to the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, Kenny, which is Jacoby, who had a history of mental health issues, began exhibiting erratic behavior and physically attacked staff on the night of December 7th. After being brought under control, so he calmed down, the sheriff's office said he became unresponsive. He was pronounced dead at a hospital the next morning. Like, what? So we went from showing erratic behavior, and these people are supposed to be trained to, have certain measures in place of how to deal with someone who's showing erratic behavior. Because, people in the criminal justice system, of course, they're going to have mental illness. Why are they there in the first place? Or, a lot of us suffer from mental health issues. So there's supposed to be measures in place that, you're supposed to use to help calm that person down. And it said after being brought under control, meaning that there was control over the situation. So how is there control over the situation and then this person became unresponsive and pronounced dead the next morning? Like, how does that happen? Okay. So it says, recent reporting by the Boston Globe has painted a more detailed picture of what happened that night. Internal video, and there's a video out there that's circulated. I haven't watched it. I don't plan on watching it. But there's a video, I guess, of the incident that occurred there. So it said, internal video obtained by the Globe shows Kenny running around a cafeteria, fleeing a group of officers after he appeared to square up with one of them. While the video is grainy, it shows a scrum forming between several correctional officers and Kenny by a stairwell, with at least one officer throwing punches. Witnesses to the incident, because witnesses are always the key, told the Globe that officers knelt on Kenny's neck when he was on the ground and responded with excessive force. Considering his mental health challenges were known throughout the unit. Whatever the situation was, he didn't have to die like that, one witness told the Globe. All in custody deaths in Massachusetts are referred to the chief medical examiner, and it says the cause and manner of his death is not yet known, which they always say. They're investigating the circumstances surrounding his death. It also says that his obituary described him as full of life, curiosity, and energy. He grew up in Springfield, which is where I'm from. That's why it hit home, It hit home not only because he's from my hometown, but it also hit home because I have a son who's now incarcerated. Kobe faced challenges throughout his life, including mental health struggles that began in early childhood. Despite these challenges, he remained intelligent, expressive, and hopeful. He wanted more out of life, a job, a family, stability, and purpose. He longed to build a future and to be understood for who he truly was. Kenny played football for Springfield Central High School, which is where I went to high school, about 15 years ago, according to clips on file at the Republican. So he was so good that he was in clips in the Republican, highlighting his football career. A speedy defender at middle and outside linebacker. He ran back an Agawam fumble 91 yards for a touchdown on the way to a 41-12 Central victory in October of 2011. That was in his junior season. So that's a great, itinerary to have, He was obviously a great football player. He had, a good future ahead of him. He was only 32 years old, His mom is devastated. I read a couple of her posts. And it just, my heart goes out to the Kenny family and whoever is grieving his death, because this is just tragic, and it should have never happened. But, it just goes to show, that nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Yes, they have new laws, and they pass these laws, but they're still getting away with it, and they're still doing it, because his mom did post also that the correctional officers were able to go to work. I don't know if it was the next day or whatever, but after his death, they were able to return to work. Like, how does that happen? So pretty much what's going to happen is that his death is pretty much going to be ruled like an accident, and that they were defending themselves. That's 9 times out of 10 what's going to happen. Like, I can't tell the future, but that's usually what happens when these things occur. But a part of my podcast also is just to highlight things that are going on in the world that deserve to be heard. I'm not going to be speaking about nonsense on here and things that just don't matter. I'm going to speak about positive things, about, God, about real life stuff, and sharing other people's stories and the statistics and what's going on in this world that people need to be more aware of. I can't share everything, but I'm going to share things that come to my attention, and that stuff just really devastates me. Rest in peace, Jacoby Kenny. My heart and my condolences and prayers go out to the Kenny family again. We just gotta really stay woke, on what's going on in this world and this society, against our brown and black brothers and sisters. Like, this is just a devastation, not only them, it's just, with this whole ICE situation. Like, I'm not even going to get started with that, but, it's just, I don't really need to say much, for people to really understand what's going on in this world. People got to stay woke, do your research. And yeah, but that pretty much is going to wrap up my podcast. I am at 57 minutes. So I'm going to end it with reading a couple excerpts from my my devotions, just to kind of lighten the mood. I really hope that you guys enjoyed episode 3. Look out for more. Please, I can't stress this enough, subscribe to my channel, watch these videos in length. They have lots of information and just comforting words and encouragement. That's what I want to offer, in spreading God's word. All right, so this one is a season for everything. Motherhood or parenthood. This is a motherhood daily devotion book, but I'll say parenthood as well, because all hoods are accepted. Motherhood is full of seasons. You move from one to the other with little control of beginnings and endings. Nothing lasts forever. You conquer something and it changes. The baby's sleep schedule changes. The toddler's language develops. The child's interests evolve. The teenager or young adult navigates life without you. Maybe you relish the ever-altering seasons of motherhood, or maybe they leave you feeling like you can't quite keep up. In either situation, remember that each season has a purpose. Each one, no matter the length, is orchestrated by God. He is the designer who is good and kind, and He leads you with gentleness. If you're feeling lost in your current season of mothering or parenting, or just life, bring your worries to Him and ask for direction. He will anchor you and remind you of His unfailing love. Amen to that. Father, whatever season I'm in, remind me of your faithfulness. Help me to depend on you when life is quickly changing. When I can't keep up, keep me steady and remind me of your unfailing love. You have a purpose for each season I walk through. Help me to trust in you to lead me. Amen to that. All right, so the next one is from God's Word for Simple Abundance. Devotions for Everyday Inspiration. I really love this book too. It has very short excerpts, but they're very just timely and encouraging. So it's called Faith to Resist. A teenage girl found herself continually tempted by her friends to do things she knew she couldn't or shouldn't. Once she was offered drugs, occasionally she was offered alcohol. Often she was approached by boys who tried to take advantage of her. Her constant reply was that she was a Christian. Usually she was made fun of for her faith. One time, however, a friend asked her why her faith made such a difference. The girl replied, "I really want to do what God tells me to do. When I do what He wants, I feel better about myself." Wow. "When I do wrong, I feel terrible. I'd rather feel good inside and have people make fun of me than feel lousy and give in to temptation." Faith like that is hard to have. It is easy to give in to temptation when it constantly attacks you. But it's good to know that when we resist the temptations, God makes it all worthwhile. He makes us feel good about ourselves and gives us even more power to resist in the future. The prayer says, "Dear Father, I am faced by so many temptations. Help me to resist them. Grant that I might rely on your will and power. Be with me in every situation. Amen." God be Goddin'. That's all I'm going to say, because I literally was it just highlights everything that I was saying, as far as, we're wrecked, but we're rescued, stop giving in to, the distractions in life and the temptations in life that gets thrown at us. We run to what's familiar and old habits, but it only feels good in the moment. And then after that, we end up feeling lousy, So we got to stop running on that hamster wheel and start moving and looking forward, on God's path. So I just really appreciate you guys listening. If you guys made it this far, I appreciate you guys. Please hit that like and subscribe button. And I just really hope that I wasn't rambling. I mean, I know I wasn't, but, I hope, I wasn't rambling to you guys and that you guys were able to take something out of my podcast. I really do, I encourage you guys to give me pointers, or if you want to, be my guest on my podcast, or if you want me to share your story or someone's story that you or if you want something for me to talk about, like another topic, just I take all advice and recommendations. So that's what brings the community together. I feel like the community is not communiting, if that's a word, but lack of comments, I'm not sure if I'm, I know that I'm doing a good job, but when you engage and when you comment and you give feedback, that's what truly helps the hosts. And we're all a community, that's what I'm trying to build, is a community, not a fan base. I'm not trying to be famous. I'm not trying to do none of that. I'm just trying to build a community where we can all just help one another and encourage one another. So please drop your comments, like, subscribe, drop your recommendations, and all of that is appreciated. Thank you again for watching Rooted with Resilience. God bless. Love y'all.